PSA. Oh, fishbone diagram. Levers. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. I was busy thinking about improvement science. In particular, continuous improvement. What? You don't know what improvement science is? Well, let me tell you all about this white paper prepared for the White House meeting on excellence in education, the importance of academic mindsets. That I'm not really supposed to talk about since it's a white paper and all, but it's called Improvement Research Carried Out Through Network Community, Accelerating Learning About Practices that Support More Productive Student Mindsets. It was done by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching with lead author Anthony S. Bright from the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. Even Luis Gomez from UCLA was part of this, so I'm actually hoping he would be on my committee, but he hasn't gotten back to me yet. But anyway, well, let me start off defining what improvement science is. The central goal of improvement research is to accelerate the field's capacity to learn, and through practice, to improve. It taps the natural human inclination to learn by actually doing. So what does that mean? Well, have you ever been at a meeting where someone who talks a lot says, we have to do this, blah, 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 and this to be student-centered, haha, something about equity, blah, blah. Or have you been plagued by initiative after initiative, where sometimes it's actually a good idea, but it goes nowhere? Well, this article starts by saying that we, higher ed, or ed in general, have tons of great ideas. The problem is that we just suck at implementation. Or in their words, our emphasis on creating networks engaged in improvement research related to mindset is not based on shortcomings in the academic literature, but rather on the observation that there have been many promising ideas in the history of education, and shockingly, very few examples of ones that have been successfully implemented with reliability at scale. Well, in a nutshell, this paper tries to do three things. Introduces improvement research and network improvement communities called NICs, where practitioners and researchers can work together to change the often individual approach to change. 2, it explains why improvement research requires practical measures distinct from those commonly used. And 3, it presents a case study to show how systemic improvement work was done to promote student mindsets and developmental math at community college. This work actually eventually led to something called Statway and Quant.
Getting into the detail, there are 4 tenets of improvement science that the article stresses. First, its advancing quality must be integral in day-to-day work, meaning that the whole idea is to improve quality. And that improvement science embraces a design development ethic, basically to learn quickly at a low cost and using a systematic approach. This is why we have something like the PDSA and these charts here from the article, in that you actually take what's going on in practice and use that to develop more processes to improve things. Second is using explicit systems thinking. So actually coming up with kind of a theory, a working theory of what you believe will produce a change. And that's why we have this example of a concept map that we'll talk about a little bit later as we get into the case study. Improvement research is problem-centered. So we actually have a problem that we're trying to attack. In this case study, it was that 5% of students passed developmental math, and then having a laser-like focus on quality improvement, and that variability in performance is the core problem to solve. Basically, you want to make sure that this is a generalizable across different instructors, in this particular case, different institutions, as much as you can. You cannot improve at scale what you cannot measure, so there is a focus on the measurements here. And there are 3 types of measurement that the article points out to, which is accountability, theory development and testing, and improvement. Where accountability kind of just wants to hold people accountable, getting people in trouble, basically. Then there's also this theory piece, and this is important as we talk about the networked improvement communities, is that there's a mixture of both theory and then the actual hands-on, day-to-day practice of it. And that's really where improvement comes into play. Is determining whether an educational change is actually an improvement. Do you actually see improvements? And that's why we have the use cases for improvement measures. It's either to assess change, so did the change that I implemented actually lead to an improvement or not? predictive analytics, so being able to actually predict whether or not one change will lead to another, and priority setting. So again, you'll notice that for the measurement specifications on the very right, I have the same measurement specification for predictive analytics and priority setting, which is that brief, highly predictive measures that are practical to administer and quickly analyzed and reported on, strongly related to key outcomes. So that's not a typo by me. It was listed the same inside the article, which I guess I could argue for unless it was a typo, but I would say that they do talk about priority setting several times, and that when you're doing improvement measures, it will help you kind of pinpoint where you need to change, what needs to change, what drivers are producing problematic outcomes, so that way you could then decide what levers you want to pull on. So finally to the case study, which is improving developmental mathematics outcomes in community colleges. And so I put this conceptual model up earlier just to kind of show their example, because the focus of this article really was on the improvement science, not so much the case study. The case study was just kind of there to kind of say, hey, we've actually done this, and we're going to show you bits and pieces of that, and show you that it's worked, so that if we could actually get more people in education to use improvement science, we think that more initiatives can have success. So very briefly, it had a problem, right? Which we know improvement science is problem focused. The center part was research-based, instructional design, and they came up with something called productive persistence, which is a set of non-cognitive factors that allow students to succeed in their academic coursework. And then again, it was measurable in the end. To give you a better idea, they actually have a concept map that they produced, which led to this idea of productive persistence. So we see 5 levers here, and the different actions that need to be taken. Some of them are kind of outcomes that they need the students to have, all kind of written in that active form, like students have this, students see this, as well as what faculty need to do. Faculty care whether students succeed. Faculty believe students can succeed. And then how they actually created a practical measure for these drivers. Well, first they took a list of 900 individual surveys, and they were able to reduce that down to 26 based on their criteria that came from theory, and contextualizing that into practice and pre-testing. And then they conducted this productive persistence survey that they developed on the first day of class and then 3 weeks later. And some of the things they found was that as interest in math increased, beliefs about their inability to learn math decreased, math anxiety, and their feelings of not belonging also declined. There were also some predictive analytics. From the survey, the Productive Persistence Survey, they were able to predict student performance on online homework tasks. They also came up with an at-risk indicator based on that same survey with 3 kind of criteria, which were skills and habits for succeeding in college, the fixed mindset about math, and mindsets, again, about that belonging. And they saw that that at-risk indicator predicted the end of course exam performance. A little bit more about the NICs, the Networked Improvement Communities, is that you kind of need a coordinating hub, is what they would recommend, where they collect measures across the network, they analyze the variation, but most importantly, they're kind of there to keep everything the same, right? You have a common framework, common tools that you use, and they're just kind of critical to coordinate that continuous improvement so that it continues, right? Just like the name says. One additional thing that seems kind of not related, but they just kind of gave another example of how they use this idea of improvement science and continuous improvement, is that in the first year, they decided that they wanted to really tackle absences, which was part of supporting that productive persistence idea. So first they came up with some routines and scripts for just emailing students who were absent. Then they kind of went a little bit more advanced and they came up with this group noticing routine, right, where students were actually contacting each other when they were absent. So they were in a group together and they would work together daily, and if one of their group members was absent, it was their responsibility to just check in with them and, give them the notes that they missed or anything else that was important or relevant from class that day, but also just to encourage them to come to class. And the graph here on the bottom corner is for that group noticing routine. So you see the typical attendance in red as it declines throughout the course. And you could see that the median here was that 85% of the 44 students, as it still kind of bounced around and kind of drooped up, but it was an improvement. And then their most kind of advanced little idea was this effective group role functioning. So students were actually given these laminated cards that describe their expectations for different roles, and the roles would rotate throughout the course. And then there was a special protocol where people would rate the others in the group based upon the role that they had that day. And this actually resulted in 90% median attendance.
Rohana? Yeah, I pretty much taught her everything she knows. Oh. Success will continue to elude educational reformers unless we equip them and their institutions with better ways of understanding practical problems they are facing, with more systematic approaches for addressing them. You know, it's funny, I taught Statway, the course that came out of this case study, and I personally really like the curriculum. However, it seems like it's kind of gotten thrown as another initiative thrown in the trash can, and mainly because the continuous improvement wasn't continued to be practiced. With new measures like AB 705, it seemed to kind of lose its edge. However, there are a lot of great things that could still be kept from that initiative. So hopefully these practices are something that more schools could actually use.